Hello guys, welcome to today's session on Azure App Service Part 2. This is the second session down the line where we will pick up from the last topic that we covered in previous video, that is to create an app service plan. In the last session, we were discussing this topic and we covered it till the staging slot concept. Now today, we'll move beyond that. Next, we'll talk about the daily backups, the Azure Traffic Manager, as well as Azure Compute Units. Finally, we'll discuss about memory and then we'll jump into the hands-on section where we will create a web app using Azure App Service. I hope all of you are clear with this inventory list, and I would like to request all of you guys to consider enabling that subscribe button and bell icon so that you never miss any technical update from Intellipaat YouTube channel. That being said, let's jump into the session directly.
Then you also get a daily backup. So it's basically saying 10 times daily. And this number you can always request to Azure to, if you want a more frequent backups, that you can always request to Azure to take that. Then finally, you also get a traffic manager access as well. So traffic manager is, I would say, works as a gateway between multiple instances of your server and how it's basically routes your request to a specific uh, app service. So let's say a request is coming from US, needs to go to the app service which is deployed in US, and a request which is coming from India needs to go to the app service which is deployed in India. So that kind of things you can manage with Traffic Manager. So it's basically improves the performance as well as your availability by routing traffic between multiple instances of your app. Okay, so apart from these features, so you do get these hardware upgrade as well depending on the pricing tier. You can see with this pricing tier you are getting 50 GB of storage. So if you want more storage, you can always choose for more storage. And then what is this Azure Compute Unit? So these compute units actually, how the compute units is calculated. So if you look at, you will get a series computer on this or a series instance of this. So you can get a list of what this series means. Like every series is mapped to set of functionalities like how much of CPU, how much of processing power, or so basically the VM details, whatever you will get. So that varies depending on what series you are picking. Okay, so then the computing SKUs are basically, um, let's say I'm making a request to my app service. When I'm making that request, so it's not only uses my VM, right? So it also uses some part of the networking, some part of the storage, and finally some part of the CPU as well. So combination of everything, they comes up with a Azure Computing Unit. So that is what they mentioned by you will get this much of computing unit. Okay, so this is basically the pricing tier and what features you will get. So we can choose a one where most of the things are there. I think this one will do. Okay, this one will work. This has all the features. So we'll have to basically show up this auto scaling. So yeah, so traffic manager, as I said, it can act as a gateway. So between, let's say, you can think about this. So let's say my endpoint or the domain name is demo.azurelearning.com, something like this, right? So this is my endpoint. So behind the scene, I have two app service instances, which is running like, let's say, demo us dot azurelearning.com. Okay, and might be another instance of app service running, which is demo, let's say India azurelearning.com, right? So what traffic manager sits between this. Okay, the user types demo.azurelearning.com. Okay, now what traffic manager says is traffic manager looks for a header inside the Azure Learning, demo.azurelearning.com. So if it finds a certain header, it basically if the user is coming from US, the request will be solved by US instance of your app service plan. And the user is from India, then your request is gonna sort by India instance of your app service plan. Okay, so this is just a single functionality. What I say, Traffic Manager has other functionalities as well, but this is what mostly what Traffic Manager does. It manages your traffic. Okay, so we have given the SKU and size. Next is tags. So tags are basically, this is something you will again see in all the resources. So that is nothing linked with a specific service, but you can basically give a key value pair here, and depending on these keys, this helps you in terms of your uh, consolidating your billings. So that's more of a like when you are, I mean, you can also filter it on the search bar itself. So let's say I want to know what all different services are being used by an application or a VIP application, what my organization has, how many services are being used by that. So I can just give it a tag like owner, a name is this, and value had something like VIP or something, and I can search by these tags. So the moment I search by owner and all the services that has been associated with that tag, I can see that service list as well. And majorly the tags would help you in the billing and create reports around this as well. Okay, so you will see tags in every service or every resource what we create. You will see tags as well. Okay, so I'll just keep it as blank. Let's create our plan. Okay, seems like our deployment is complete. Let's go to the resource. Okay, so this is how your app service plan looks like. So if you look at it, talks about here how many, what is your pricing plan? So we choose, I mean, we created with S1 and only one instance of that is running right now. So this is what it suggests. And then if there is any deployment slots has been created, so no. So that's why it is 0. And what for which operating system we created for Windows. And then some basic details here. Okay, and then you get a little monitoring over here as well. And what we have done, the first part we have done by creating an app service. So we have a plan ready, right? So now what we need is a web app which can be hosted in this app service plan. The next thing what we need a web app, right? So let's create a web app now. So next resource what we are gonna create, let's go to create resource. Let's search for web app. Okay, so this is what I need. Let's create this. Okay, as I was saying, these two things you would see in all the resource what we are going to create, subscription and resource group. So we are working on AZ learning. So I'll just choose that. Then it's asking about what will be your name of your web app. So I mean, whatever name you are going to choose, that needs to be unique inside Azure website.net. So on a free tier, as long as, I mean, no matter which pricing tier your app service plan is in, Azure gives you a free domain name as well every time you create a web app inside Azure. So which is Azure website.net. So let's give it any name. So I'll say, let's say AZ web app. So this name has been taken. So I'll say, let's say AZ web app LAN. Okay, so AZ LAN web app. Okay, this is available. So next is how do you want to publish your web app? So whether you want to publish it through code or you want to go by a Docker container. So if you want to go by Docker container as well, you can go. You need to go with this approach. Or if you want to go to code, you can go ahead with this. So let's first go ahead with code. Then it's asking about what is the runtime stack of your application. So what are the different technologies that is supported by Azure for building your web application? So these are your technologies. So a .NET applications, .NET Core 3.1, ASP.NET, Java, Node, PHP, Python, Ruby. So these are the technologies. So if your web application is built on any of these technologies, you can host in Azure. Or if it is not built in any of these technologies, you can go for a Docker container as well. Okay, so let's choose the runtime stack. For us, it will be, let's say, .NET 5. This is the latest one. So we'll choose .NET 5. I think Docker would be if you are going by the DevOps module. So they would be covering how do you deploy in Docker, how do you use Kubernetes and all. So, okay, so Yeah, so we choose runtime stack as .NET 5. Then the operating system is Windows. Okay, so then the next thing is, now this is our web app. This web app needs to be associated to a app service plan. That is how it can run, and it will inherit those features what the app service plan provides, right? So in order to choose that, uh, yes, so this is one what we created earlier. If you remember, is one tier AZ app service plan. So let's choose that. So one thing you need to note over here is the region where you are creating this web app needs to be same as the region where the app service plan present in. If it is not same, so let's say I want to create in Canada Central. Now you will see I won't see that option here as well. So you need to make sure both are in the same region. Okay, next is SKU1 size. So it will basically inherit the SKU1 size what you have opted for while creating the app service plan. So that's basically the metadata what we need for creating a web app. Next is deployment. Deployment, we will be talking about it. So this is still in preview. So we'll be talking about its own section once the web app is created. Next is monitoring. Yeah, so monitoring, it's basically asking you to create a application inside resource. So you can integrate an application inside resource to your web app, but application inside, we will be talking about it. It's an own module. So right now we'll just keeping it as no, don't enable application insights. Tags, I'll just keep it as blank. Let's review and create. Okay, by the time it's creating, I think it's created. Let's go back to our, yeah, I wanted to go back to app service plan and let's see what was the status over there. So if you look at here, this is our app service plan. So now AZ Learning is our resource group. Inside this is our plan. And this is where you can see how many apps are part of this app service plan. Right now we are just creating one, so this has not been created yet. So there is a deployment failed. We need to see that. But the moment this deployment is completed, we should see like that app would appear over here. Okay, so let's see why it failed. Website with given name already exists. Great. Okay. Okay, my bad. I closed that. So let's quickly create it one more time. So we wanted to create a web app. Let's go to create. Resource group is AZ Learning, and web app name is, I'll say Azure Learning web app. So today's 27. I just give it a random name. Okay, runtime stack is .NET 5. Region is Central US, and app service plan is AZ app service plan. Rest all I am keeping it as disabled. I mean, application inside is disabled. Tag is blank. Let's go ahead and create this. Okay, so now our web app has been deployed. Let's go to the resource now. Before we go here, now go to the app service plan. Let's try to refresh this page. Let's see if the web app is associated with this app service plan. So now you can see this web app is part of this app service plan. You can host as many of websites or as many of web app, web APIs as part of this plan. So now that web app is our ready, let's go ahead and browse it and see how does it look like. Okay, this is the URL. So if I go and try to access this, this is how it is look like. So this is the I think startup page for any web app you create. Right now, this web application is completely empty. Okay, so what are the basic details you will see here? So if you look at, you will see the URL by which you can access it. On top, you will get these details like whether you want to stop your web application, restart, delete, and these things I'll talk about. Publish profile, what it is. All right, so that's basically what you see over here. And on the left-hand side, you see a lot of other options. So we'll go by one. Before that, what I want to do is, so now what we see is our default website. But this is not what we want. We want our website to be hosted here. What website, what we are creating, right? So that is what we are gonna do next. What we are gonna do, we will create a out-of-the-box .NET Core website, and that website, we're gonna host it as part of this URL. Okay, so let's go to Visual Studio. Okay, I just want to create a new project. Yeah, so what I want is I want to create a ASP.NET Core web application, and this web application I want to host it against Azure, right? So let's create this. Okay, let's call this as the solution name I want to call this as, let's say, AZ. I want to give it a, let's say, March learning. Okay, this is our solution name. I'll post this code to GitHub as well. So project name, let's give it as AZ website. Okay, it says that, that's fine. Let's go ahead and create this. Okay, so what I want to create, so if you remember the runtime, what we have chosen at the time of creating our web app is ASP.NET Core, I mean ASP.NET 5 or .NET 5. So this is what I'm choosing. This is the latest version of .NET. So I'm choosing ASP.NET Core 5, and I want a MVC based web app, ASP.NET Core web app. So people who are not from .NET background, so what Visual Studio is, I mean, you can download the community version of Visual Studio, which is free. And this set of things, these are basically the templates was Visual Studio showing me for creating a web app. What this will do is this will basically bring in some boilerplate code to build a web application. So it will basically give me a very basic web application, which is in the MVC architecture. Okay, this is what Visual Studio is doing. I think .NET guys would be able to relate this. They would be doing it on a day-to-day basis. So I'll just go ahead and create this web app. Okay, so now I have created this website. So how does this website looks like? So this is the out of the box website what we get in Visual Studio. So let me run this. Yeah, so this is how our website looks like. So our objective is this website, we need to host it as part of uh, as part of the Azure App Service. Okay, if we hit our URL, we should see this website. This is what we want to do. So first I will show you a very default approach or a basic approach if you have a less number of teams and as long I mean 20 or 30 teams that works well. But if you have a bigger team, I'll show you how you want to deploy this application, right? So we have a very simple web app. So what I want to do is I want to deploy this. So before you deploy, so if you go to your web app, so this is the web app what we created, you see this option, right? Get publish profile. So let's download this. So there is a download button. Let's download this. Now, once it's downloaded, so let's go and see what is there. So if I just open this guy, so this is an XML file. So I'll just copy the content of this. And what I'll do is I'll just go to an XML viewer online. I think I might have something here. Yeah. So this is what I'll just beautify. So if you look at this XML file has these entries inside here. So what it has different profiles. So this is my first profile. And so if you look at, so this is one profile, Azure Learning Web App. And then what is the full name? Azure Learning Web App Web Deploy. So Web Deploy is one profile name and FTP is another profile name. And then I have Zip Deploy. Then I have read-only FTP. And if you look carefully, what it has is, so it has a deployment methods and where it is deploying to. So this is deploying to this URL. Okay, so the publishing profile basically gives you and schema for where your Visual Studio needs to connect to dump the binaries, whatever binaries your application creates. So it gives you different methods. So the one what we are seeing here, it's a web deploy method. In the web deploy method, it's basically saying this, use these credentials. This is my username. This is my passwords. Use these credentials. And finally, all our binaries, let's put it inside this destination app URL. Okay, and then there is an FTP version as well. In this FTP version, it's saying use these credentials. Again, it's giving us some credential. This is Azure username and this is the password, and go ahead and put all our binaries inside this destination URL. So these are the different profiles or different deployment methods what that publishing profile XML is having, right? So now let's bring these information into Visual Studio. So if I go to, let's say, my web app website, so if you right click here and you will see a publish option right integrated to Visual Studio. Okay, so depending on which version of the Visual Studio you are in, so right now I am in Visual Studio 2019, so I see this here. but some of you might see it in, I think here in the view section or in the project section. In the project section, you may see that publish option. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and click on publish. The moment I go for publish, so Visual Studio give me a lot of options. How do you want to basically deploy your application? Whether you want to deploy to Azure or a Docker container, all to a or to a specific folder or to a FTP server or directly to a IaaS hosted in some server or in your local server. Okay, so you can either go by this route if you want to go to deploy this to Azure. So you will choose next, and it will ask you like where your, I mean, what type of app service you have. So if you have, I mean, we have created a Windows, you can choose that. Then it basically looking for like on this subscription, what are the different app service instances you have to this app service. Or the next option is we have a publishing profile, right? You can, instead of going by this route, you can also go by the publishing profile route as well. So where I'm saying, let's say import a profile, let's hit next. Let's go to browse, and my download file is, this is what I downloaded. This is my publish settings. Let's open it. Okay, so what it did the moment, so it read basically that XML file what we have just seen, and it created this profile for us. So if you look, now it has created these three profiles. One is FTP, one is web deploy, and this is just a read-only FTP. Okay, so let's use the web deploy one. All right, so now let's click on publish. I think the deployment is successful. So I'm expecting as part of this, I should see my website. Now the website what we had, now that is alive. So we are successfully able to deploy this. This is a good way. I mean, this helps as long as your team size is less and your project is a small project. And if you are doing some kind of POC and all, this helps. But with a big team size and with people committing in multiple places or multiple geographical location, this will not work. I mean, this has its own demerits, right? That will be, there will be always a dependency. So what are the different deployment options what Azure provides apart from this, what we have just seen, right? So if I go to the web app, so now you will see an option on the right, on the left hand side, which is deployment center. So if I go to the deployment center, okay, so let's go to the classic one. It has a more detailed way. Yeah, so if you look at, so Azure also supports your CI/CD pipeline as well. You can create CI/CD pipelines to, I mean, directly to your web app itself. So what are the different CI/CD pipeline or the continuous deployment, what it offers? Uh, it has integration to Azure repos, which is like your Azure DevOps. So if you're, uh, I mean, if you are using Azure DevOps as your version control, you can create your uh, release pipeline and development or build pipelines directly integrated to this web app. That is for your CI/CD pipelines. This also has support to Bitbucket and GitHub. So these three integrations you have, and local git is something if you are POCing something and that works. But in more advanced scenarios or where you have teams in multiple regions, either you have to go by these three routes. One is Azure DevOps or a Bitbucket version control or a GitHub. Okay, so I'll just show you how you can configure. So let's say go to GitHub. Let's continue. So I am already, if you look at here, so it's basically already connected to my account, GitHub account. That's why it's basically didn't ask me for credential. So if you're doing it for first time, it's a very easy flowing screen. There is nothing to learn. If you click on it, will just bring you a login screen. You log in and you will get linked to your GitHub account. Okay, so let's continue. Then it's basically gives you, these are the different build services by which you want to build your application into. So either you can go for the Azure pipelines or app service build services. So I'll just go ahead with the app service build service. Let's go to continue. And then finally, it's asking you which branch of your repo or the version control you want to associate it to this instance of web app, right? So inside this, I have two organizations. So depending on your selections, you will select one. Then which repository you want to target to. So let's say I want to target to, let's say, Azure Learning Web App, right? Inside the Azure Learning Web App. So right now I have only a single branch. So in a real world scenario, you may see multiple branches, like a release branch, like a hotfix branch, a QA branch. You may have multiple branch, or finally a master branch or a production branch, which points to your web app. So you can associate that branch with this web app. So what happens once you associate? Every time there is a build, or every time there is a commit to this branch, master branch, so automatically the deployment will happen. So that is what the continuous integration is, or the continuous deployment is. So it has direct support for your CI/CD pipelines. All right, so that's basically one way of doing it. Now this it's being supported what I have showcased in GitHub. So if you have version control in uh, Azure DevOps or in Bitbucket, it also supports that as well. Local Git, if you want to configure, you can also configure. But in a, as I said, in a big team, this will not run. Okay. The next is this is the one is the continuous deployment. Next is basically push and sync. So it also Azure also supports deployment via what they say, like in manual deployment or push and sync model is you build your project. Once you build or you publish your project, and once you publish it to a folder. Basically what it means is get all the binaries needed for your web application to run and put it in any of these drives. Might be in OneDrive, Dropbox, or any external services. You put it, and once you put this, so there will not be a continuous integration like what happens here. The moment there is a check-in happen or your pull request gets approved, your application gets deployed. That will not happen. You will have to come to Azure, and you will see once this integration is done, you will basically see a sync button. So you'll have to click on that sync. So this is what they are saying push and sync. So every time there is a change, you have to create your binaries, drop that binaries inside your Dropbox or OneDrive, and then come to the Azure, come to this screen and click on sync. That will basically bring in your binaries to Azure. That is your next option. Then it also supports an FTP deployment as well, which is a traditional way of deployment before CI/CD. So CI/CD came into the picture, I think 5 years or 4 to 5 years, it becomes highlight and every organization is adapting to it. But before CI/CD, it's majorly FTP, where we are deploying things using FTP way, or we package it to some folder, and due to by some way we transfer that files to our production servers. So you also have support to FTP as well. So with FTP, if you see how it works is you need a FTP client. If I go inside here, so FTP client, there is some free tools like FileZilla. You can install FileZilla. So once you install FileZilla, then this is the FTP endpoint what you get. So you need to connect to this FTP endpoint. And once you connect to this FTP endpoint, you need to authenticate yourself. Now, for authentication, you can give these credentials. Okay, so once you authenticated, you can basically transfer all your binaries into Azure. I mean, directly inside, directly to Azure. So once you transfer to Azure, you will see your changes right inside your web app.
Just a quick info guys, if you want to make a career in cloud computing, then Intellipaat provides an advanced certification on cloud and DevOps by IIT Madras. This course is taught by industry experts and IIT Madras faculty. This course is designed to upskill and land your dream job.